Hi, this is Mrs. Habeck, and on behalf of all of the life science teachers, we wish you the very best of luck on your MCA test next week. And we wanted to help you review some things that you have already learned in the past. Nothing we're going to do today is new information, but it might be information that's stuck somewhere in the back of your mind, and we want to help bring that back to the front. Calling it the Life Science Turbo Review because we're going to skim over very quickly with the goal being to remind you of things that you already know. All right, so with that, please grab your packet and turn to page 12. We're going to be using these pages 12 through 15 to do the life science review, and it goes right along with the video, so you should be able to follow really easily. Today we are going to start with a quick video, and I want to warn you that the video has really cheesy music. It's a little cheesy, but the reason that I like this video is because it's going to give you a really good overview of kind of this whole life science review. So try to ignore the cheesy music and just focus on the information that's being presented to you.
Welcome to Math and Characteristics of Living Things. Why are some objects considered alive and other objects considered not alive? Let's look at the 7 characteristics of living things. The first characteristic of living things is that all living things are composed of cells. Next, living things grow and develop. Living things reproduce and produce offspring. Living things also contain DNA, deoxyribonucleic acid. Living things require energy for their daily activities. Living things respond to stimuli. Let's see an example. Living things also have levels of organization.
All right, so we're going to be talking about living things. The real name for an organism is a living thing. So this is where you're going to start writing in your notes on the top of page 12. Living things can take lots of different shapes and forms. But as you saw in the video and will continue to see, there are things that all living things have in common. Living things are made of cells. Some are made of many cells, like this puppy or this tree. And in your notes, I'd like you to write down an example or two of living things that are made of many cells. You can use my examples that you see in the PowerPoint, or you can think of your own. Some living things are made of single cells. For instance, you can see in this diagram there's a bunch of protists, like an amoeba or a euglena or a paramecium, that are made of a single cell. They have everything they need right there in that single cell. Bacteria are also single-celled organisms. And finally, the word eukaryotic. Eukaryotic cells are cells that have a true nucleus. Eukaryotic cells are the cells that you learned about in your cells unit. You built your model about a eukaryotic cell last year. Those are eukaryotic cells, cells with a nucleus. Plant and animal cells have a lot in common. They're both eukaryotic cells, but they also have some major differences. So take a second and look at these two really simplified diagrams of a plant cell and an animal cell. And look to see what comes to your attention that makes them look a little different. All right. There are three main differences between plant cells and animal cells. The first main difference is that plant cells have a cell wall for structure and support. Animal cells don't have that. Animal cells are kind of squishy. Plant cells, you'll notice, are kind of more rectangular and they're more brick-like, and that is because of their cell wall. Their cell wall makes their cells be a lot more like bricks or blocks, where animal cells are more kind of squishy and more blobby. All right, a second thing that is different is that plant cells have a large water vacuole. And so you can see in that plant cell diagram that the vacuole is the biggest part. It's full of water. Animal cells do not have that big water vacuole. And finally, plant cells have chloroplasts, and that is a part that animal cells do not have, and it's because plant cells need to be able to do photosynthesis. And we're going to get into photosynthesis in just a second. But that is what they have that allows them to do it, is the chloroplasts that are full of chlorophyll. Chlorophyll is the green pigment that makes the cells look green because they're full of those chloroplasts. All right. Moving on to our next thing that is true about organisms is that all organisms and cells need energy. They need a constant supply of energy to do everything, any of their life functions, to reproduce, to grow, to repair themselves, to do anything. They need a constant supply of energy. On the left side of that two-column chart, we're going to talk a little bit about plants. Plants are called producers. And they get that name because they are made of cells that can produce their own food. Now, plants are not the only producers, but they're kind of the primary ones, and they're the ones that I have a feeling you would be most likely to be asked about on your MCA. So that's the one I'm focusing on. Plants are able to produce their own food by doing the process of photosynthesis. So when they make that food for themselves, that becomes the food that they use for energy. So you've got this diagram where it says basic photosynthesis, and I noticed that your diagram on your handouts got pretty dark when it got copied. So if it's hard for you to see the labels on your diagram, please make sure you use my diagram right now to improve those labels. All right, make them so you can read all of the words that are on there. Okay, I also want you to pay attention to the arrows and make sure that you can see the arrows on your diagram, because those arrows are giving us the kind of the direction of what's happening here. Photosynthesis, I always think of this as kind of like a recipe. You've got some ingredients you have to put in, and then it cooks for a little bit, and then afterwards you've got something that is a little different, but it still has all those same main parts in it, those same molecules in it. So you'll notice for photosynthesis on the left side of your diagram, there are three things listed. And those are what we call our inputs for photosynthesis. On your note sheet, go ahead and add these 3 inputs. You'll notice that there's carbon dioxide that is going in, and that's coming in from the air. This is the carbon dioxide that's just out in the air, and it is going to enter the leaves of the plant. The leaves have these tiny holes on the underside of them called stomata, and they will open and close for this gas exchange to happen. So carbon dioxide is going to go in from the air in through the leaves. The second input is water, and water is going to come in through the roots of the plant. So as that enters the roots of the plant, it's going to come in and it's going to travel through the vascular tissue to get up to all parts of the plant, and particularly up to the leaves where that photosynthesis is going to happen. And then finally, we need light energy, which usually is from the sun. That light energy is kind of like the oven that this is all going to get cooked in. And so that adds the energy for that to happen. And then in the chloroplasts of the plant cells, this chemical or series of chemicals reactions are going to happen. And the end result is going to be our 2 outputs. We've got oxygen and glucose. Now notice it says glucose and then it says sugar. You can use those interchangeably in this case. You can also just call it food for the plant. They all mean the same thing. So the process results in glucose or sugar that's going to be the food for the plant, and oxygen actually in this case is a byproduct. It is a waste product of this process, and it's given off to the air through those same stomata that the carbon dioxide went in on the input side. The oxygen is going to be released to the air, and that's actually how we get this oxygen in our atmosphere, is because of the oxygen being released from the plants.
If you want to know how a plant grows, it takes water, air, and sunlight, and makes cellulose. Every plant can do this fundamental process, and we can call this photosynthesis. Unlike me and you, plants need CO2, and they make oxygen that stops us turning blue. Every plant can do this fundamental process, and we can call this photosynthesis.
All right, I know that you were waiting for that and you were hoping that would be in there. So hopefully that will help you remember a little bit about photosynthesis. Now, animals, on the other hand, are consumers, which means that they consume or eat. And the food that they eat is used for their energy. Now, again, just like with plants are not the only producers, animals are not the only consumers. Fungus is a consumer, a lot of bacteria are consumers, some protists are, but we're going to just focus on animals for right now. They consume their food, which is why they're called consumers. They use that food for energy, and the food that they eat has got to be digested. So by that, we just simply mean that you need to break it down into small molecules for the cells to be able to convert it to energy. The food in the form that we take it into our body is not usable at that point to be energy for our cells. It has to get broken down into the individual molecules. And we do that with our process of digestion. All right, and that is the end of part 1 of the Life Science Turbo review.